Okay, hey guys, welcome to the next video. We're pretty much picking up where we left off. So we've just gone over lighting, and now we're going to look at how to make our own landscape, how to sculpt on that landscape, and also how to set up all of the lighting for that environment. So the first thing I'm going to do is make an entirely new level, so I don't have all of this default stuff in here with me. So if I go to my content drawer and right click in some empty space, just any empty space down here, and then I'm going to come up to level, and this is where I create our new world. So I'm going to hit level, and then we can call this anything. I'm going to call this landscape, and then I'm going to double click on it to open it up. When we double click, if we've not saved something, it will ask us to make sure that everything is saved. So we can just click on save selected and hit save again, and that's just saving that default level. Now in this new level, we currently can't see anything, and that is by design. So this is completely empty, as we can see here over on the right hand side in the outliner. We currently don't have anything there to see. So the first thing we want to do is set up the lighting. So if we go up to the window menu up in the top left and find the ENV light mixer, so this stands for environment light mixer, and we're going to click on that, and mine is opened already at the bottom of the screen. So yours will probably open in a window like this. Now, I like to dock this next to the content browser, so I'm going to click and drag from the name of the tab, and I'm going to drag it to be just next to the content browser tab, and it can be anywhere along with tab line, just like in Google Chrome. So now that we've got that, we've got an empty box at the bottom and a bunch of buttons that say create light, create atmospheric light, create sky atmosphere, volumetric cloud, and height fog. Click on every single one of these buttons until there are no more you can click on. A bunch of settings appear at the bottom. We're not going to play with those for now, but you should see we've got an atmosphere, we've got clouds, and we can see everything, and it's all nice and blue. Exactly what we usually expect. So now that we've got this, we can add a landscape because we'll finally be able to see it. So to create a new landscape, what we want to do is come up to the selection mode up at the top left, click on the drop down, and then the second one down just under selection should say landscape. So I'm going to click on landscape mode, and it will open this new window on the left hand side, and we should see this green grid appear across our world. Now this green grid is basically the preview for what our landscape is going to look like. Later on we will experiment with adding height maps to this, and it will see the green grid deform in a certain way. This is something we can do to automatically generate mountains or anything else, but for now we're just going to create a flat one that we can sculpt onto afterwards. So all these settings should be fine by default, so I'm just going to hit the blue create button. Now that it's created, we can see we've got our default material on a completely flat landscape. And when we hover over, we've got a little preview of what our brush looks like. So we automatically go into landscape sculpting mode after we've created a landscape. And the first brush we're going to look at is called Sculpt. So with the Sculpt brush, if I click and drag, we can see it raises up the landscape. Now that is by default just clicking and dragging on the Sculpt brush. If we hold shift and click and drag with the Sculpt brush, we'll see it pushes the landscape down. So generally speaking, with any of these sculpting brushes, if we hold shift, it will do the inverse of what the default action was. Now that's not true of all of them, but it is true of some of them. So erase, which obviously wouldn't have an inverse action, that one we can just click and drag on whatever it is we've sculpted, and it will put it back down to the default height or the default flat level. So if we ever make a mountain that we don't want, or we create a valley that we don't want, we can always go to the erase brush and it will get us back to that default landscape very, very quickly. Cool. So now let's make something else. So let's get some random mountains next to each other, and then we can go to the smooth brush and see what that does. So the idea of the smooth brush is, if you've got a lot of either high frequency noise or maybe a lot of peaks in your landscape, if we click and hold on them, you can see how it starts to smooth things out and interpolate between. So if you had a very sharp cliff face but you wanted it to be a gradual hill, you could use the smooth brush and that would smooth it out to be a gradual incline. The flatten brush will take the height of whichever part of the landscape you are clicked on and it will flatten it at that height. So if I click it down on the base landscape down here and click and drag, nothing happens because everything's already at that height. If I do it halfway up this hill and click and drag, it will try and raise all of the ground I paint on to that level, and then if I do it on the very top of the hill and click and drag, all of a sudden it tries to do it from that height instead. So if you wanted a big flat plateau sort of area on the top of a mountain, or if you were trying to make like Pride Rock, this would be the best way to do it, using the flatten brush. And again, we can always go in with the smooth brush if this fall off isn't what we want, and smooth it down a little bit. So we've still got that flat area on top, and it's just got a little bit nicer of a fall off now. Cool. So the next brush is ramp. Ramp, I usually just say to avoid. It is a temperamental brush, and it doesn't usually help us with most things. So we're going to skip over that for now. Erosion. So erosion seeks to emulate the sort of erosion we'd get in a real landscape. So that could be weathering effects, that could be rain, it could be hail, it could be just erosion over time from the sea, it could be anything. And as we click, we'll see it sort of starts to do not quite what the smooth brush does. It introduces some noise, so some sort of unevenness, and it can create much more visually interesting landscapes that look a lot more natural. So this looks like a hillside now that has been sort of eroded over time. The hydro brush is very similar, and this tries to cause erosion that is only created by rainfall and water. Now the hydro brush doesn't always work particularly well. They've changed it a lot over the last few versions of Unreal, but it can sometimes give a good effect, and it can start to get little sort of valleys and things that are basically rain falling down and causing almost like mini rivers in your landscape. But usually it doesn't work well on a sort of smaller scale. And then noise is the last one we're going to look at for now. So noise does a similar thing to erosion, but if we paint on and have a look, so we're painting in an area, but it's adding in a lot of lumps and bumps, and it's sort of making it more visually interesting. So it isn't painting in just a flat linear way. This is adding some areas where it will add more value and it will raise it more, some where it will raise it less, and some where it may push it down. And it's a good way to sort of do vast fields, because rather than it being totally flat, which is not very realistic, we get sort of mini hills, and it just looks a lot more natural. Awesome. So that is how you make a landscape and you make your landscape environment. So the next video is going to look at the very, very basics of making a material, and then we'll follow that on with how to make a landscape material and how to keyframe objects and cameras. Thanks.